In this video, we'll take a look at paper targets for practical shooting competitions, using no-shoots, kill house stage hostages, stage weapon setup, and more. Let's start creating the stage with an empty IPSC arena. We will create 3 checkpoints, so now we will move the first one to the left. Let's remove the default target and place 4 paper targets. Now let's assign them the alpha group and bind them to the checkpoint. Let's test what we got. As you can see, it takes 2 hits to finish a paper target. The number of points is equal to the sum of points for each hit. Depending on the zone, a hit can give from 1 to 5 points. Please note, the 2 best hits on the target count. Therefore, it is possible to improve the result even if the target is hit. Just hit the center zone again to get more points for the target. We forgot to save the stage before testing. Let's do it now. Each paper target has a red diagonal cross on the back. This means that it can be used as a penalty. For this purpose, you need to turn it 180 degrees. A hit in the backside will result in penalty points. Let's duplicate the targets and make them penalties. As always, we use the K key to clone the object, then press return to move it and expand it with the arrows. The basic functions of editing objects were explained in the first lessons. If you missed them, it would be better to watch these videos. Important note, if the paper target is going to be used only as a penalty target, you should enable the corresponding option in the settings. We will enable this penalty option on one target and repeat the action with the G key for all the others. Let's see what happened. You can see that for every penalty hit on the target, 10 points are deducted. This is indicated by a splash in the bottom center of the screen. Now you can see how complicated the game is. It is necessary not only to destroy the target, but in such a way as not to hit the penalty target. To increase the difficulty of the game, you can limit the maximum number of penalty points per stage. This can be done in the stage settings. Let's put 30 points, which corresponds to 3 hits in the penalty spot of the target. Let's check what happened. You can see that when the penalty limit is reached, the game ends. The results explain why in red text. Let's try to go through this fragment again without getting a penalty. If you looked carefully, you might have noticed that hitting the penalty target stand does not lead to a penalty. The second type of penalty obstacles for targets are the hostages. Hostages are used in kill house sets, but as an example we will show them in the IPSC stage. Let's create some falling terrorist targets. Before that, we will set a new checkpoint and disable the previous one. Let's choose the most vicious terrorists. Now let's place the hostages so that each covers half of the terrorist's silhouette. Let's assign the Bravo group to the terrorists. And bind them to a new checkpoint. Let's check what happened. You can immediately notice the difference between hostages and IPSC penalty targets. The penalty is charged only for the first hit in the hostage. In this case, it is considered that the hostage is killed and the silhouette turns red. Now we will learn how to allow the use of multiple weapons in a stage. To do this, open the stage settings screen. You can use up to 3 different weapons per stage. On the right we see 3 buttons: primary weapon, secondary weapon, and backup weapon. Primary weapon is a heavy and automatic weapon. Secondary weapons are rifles, shotguns, SMGs, and pistols. Backup weapon, only pistols and revolvers. Let's choose a submachine gun as a secondary weapon. Now you see the weapon filter settings screen. The settings allow you to limit the allowed weapons in several ways. We will now allow the use of SMGs developed after World War II. At the bottom of the screen, we see how the list of allowed weapons changes. Let's require the use of an optical sight. The list is shrunk even further. Now we need to make changes to the checkpoint settings, specify that this checkpoint should use a new weapon. This is done in the waypoint settings section. A new option has appeared in the drop-down list of weapons, SMG. This option was not available before. Let's see what happened. When we enter the checkpoint, the game prompts us to choose the appropriate weapon. This only happens in editor mode. When playing a set, you will have to choose a weapon before the game from the players available, or buy a new one. Now we can use the entire arsenal of the game. Let's choose Uzi. Please note, in the stage editor, weapons can be customized directly from the stage. Let's install the Trijicon ACOG military scope. As you can see, in editor mode, all weapon accessories are available to you. You do not need to buy them for points or credits. Let's check the weapon with an optical sight in action. Obviously, it is much easier to deactivate terrorists using an optical sight. Even easier, if you turn on the illumination of the reticle, by default, the tab key. Let's make it harder by giving the terrorists more hit points. As if they are wearing reinforced body armor. As always, we make changes to the settings of one object and then repeat the action for other objects with the G key. And we will make one more change to the gameplay. We just fired single shots from the Uzi. In the game settings, you can specify that if the weapon is capable of automatic fire, use it by default. Let's see what has changed. It is immediately clear that in automatic mode it is more difficult to hit a terrorist and the risk of killing a hostage has greatly increased. By the way, some optical sights, including ACOG, have an auxiliary sight. Usually this is an iron sight or a Picatinny rail for red dot sight so that you can aim at close targets without using optical zoom. If available, a tooltip is displayed at the bottom of the screen. Let's check. The scope works, but as expected, hitting has become much more difficult. ACOG sight allows you to install red dot sight through a special adapter. Unfortunately, there are no universal adapters, so of all the RDS sights available in the game, only AD-ARD3 can be installed. Let's check. Definitely, aiming with RDS is much more convenient, it's a good deal. This completes the second part. We learned how to use hostages, set up multiple weapons per stage, turn on auto mode, and tested out the secondary sights. In the last part of this video we will test dynamic paper targets. As usual, let's start by setting a new checkpoint and disabling the previous one. Now let's set up 4 mechanical targets. A double target, 2 pendulums and a rotating target. All these targets are used in real IPSC stages. Notice the double target. In fact, this is a group of 2 targets. When hitting a steel target, the group turns over and the paper target rises. Let's reset the target state with the backspace key and repeat. There is an additional section responsible for movement in the settings of mechanical targets. Let's change the initial angles and speed of the pendulum so that they swing towards each other. To do this, we need to set opposite starting angles and velocities for both pendulums. To check if we have set it up correctly, we will reset the state of all objects in the scene with the F9 key. Looks good. You can experiment with other parameters of target movement, such as the frequency of the pendulums or the speed at which the wheel rotates. Ready? We just have to assign a group to new targets and disable them by default so that they do not distract the player in an inactive state. Now we will bind the checkpoint to a new group of targets. The new targets are far away from the checkpoint. Let's add rifles to the stage. Each weapon can have several subcategories. You can see all available subcategories of rifles in the expanded list. Let's choose semi-automatic rifles. We see that 5 rifles were included in the list of weapons. And obviously it needs additional filtering. Small caliber Calico and large caliber Barrett are clearly superfluous in it. We can remove them by limiting muzzle energy. Ready? Now we change the type of weapon in the checkpoint. These 3 rifles are World War II United States Service Rifle M1 Garand, Russian Designated Marksman Rifle SVD and German Semi-Automatic Sniper Rifle HK-PSG-1. Let's test the gameplay. Done. The game turned out exactly as we expected. Let's enable the first 2 checkpoints and test the final gameplay. Wait, I don't like one moment. From the start of the stage, the player can observe all the targets. This is not very good, because he can misunderstand and start shooting at all targets from the first checkpoint. Targets will not deactivate and this will confuse the player. It will be more correct to cover the targets with an obstacle until they are active. There is a special falling metal wall for this purpose. Let's install 2 such walls in front of the second and third groups of targets. In order for the wall to fall when entering the checkpoint, it is enough to bind it to the checkpoint by simply adding it to the group of targets. Let's see what happened. Metal walls fall correctly when the checkpoint is activated, and this is much better than when all the targets are visible at once. The 6th video lesson is over. You learned a lot about penalty targets and hostages, about weapon setup, about optical sights with secondary sights, about moving targets and falling walls. We hope you were interested. Thank you for your attention.